David woke up in the middle of the night to a strange sound outside his window. Something seemed to be scratching at the glass. Dark shadows twisted across the walls of his bedroom, as if alive. He reached for the bedside lamp, but his hand trembled, and the light brought no relief. The scratching sound grew louder, as though something was trying to break in. David sat up in bed and peeked behind the curtain. Nothing. The wind chased a few scattered leaves down the street, playing with them like a predator with its prey. But in the silence, something felt wrong, something that stirred cold fear deep inside. He lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. His thoughts drifted back to that day, the day when everything changed. A year ago, David had received a letter from an old friend, Sergei. For many years, they had lost contact, and suddenly Sergei, who had mysteriously disappeared years earlier, reappeared in his life. The letter was odd. Without explanation, Sergei asked him to come to a small village hidden in the mountains. He didn't specify the reasons, only hinted that the situation was extremely serious and required David's immediate presence. At that time, David's life was monotonous and empty. Work drained all his energy, and his relationships had long fallen apart. Sergei's letter gave him a reason to escape, at least for a while. With nothing to lose, he packed his bags and set off. The road to the village, marked on the map as Dead Shadow, was enveloped in fog and darkness, as though time had stopped in this place. When David finally reached his destination, he was met with deafening silence. The village seemed abandoned. The wooden houses were half ruined, and the streets deserted. The heavy air pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. He walked through the empty streets, peering into the gray windows, where movement seemed to flicker in the corners of his vision. He reached Sergei's house, the only building with a light on. The door was slightly ajar, and David pushed it open, stepping cautiously inside. The old wooden floor creaked under his feet. Inside, there was silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Sergei was sitting in an old armchair by the fire, staring into the flames. David called his name, but he didn't respond. He approached and touched his shoulder. "You came," Sergei said quietly, without turning his gaze from the fire. "What's going on, Sergei? You disappeared so suddenly, and now you write to me, saying I must come immediately." David trailed off, sensing that words had no meaning in this strange, dead place. Sergei lifted his tired, haunted eyes to him. "They've returned. The ones we banished long ago. I thought it was all in the past, that they couldn't find us anymore. But I was wrong." "What are you talking about? Who has returned?" Sergei stood slowly and gestured for David to follow him. They walked out into the street, where the evening fog was beginning to thicken. As they approached the edge of the village, where the dark forest began, David felt an odd heaviness in his chest, as if something in this place resisted their presence, as though time itself was bending under their steps. "They're here," Sergei whispered, stopping at the forest's edge. "We were young and foolish. Back then we didn't understand what we were doing. We banished them, locked them away in the dark part of the forest. But now their rage has returned, and they will not forgive us." David looked at his friend in confusion. "Who are you talking about? What did you do?" Sergei didn't answer. He simply pointed to the dark shadows writhing deep within the forest. In those shadows, something was lurking, something that defied description, something that distorted reality itself. "They took our village. We became their prisoners," Sergei spoke in a trembling voice. "That was long ago. But now they're waking up. They need new souls." David didn't know what to think. Sergei's words seemed like the ramblings of someone gripped by fear or pain, but the chill that soaked the air and the heaviness in his chest hinted that it might all be true. "I can't stay here," David decided. "We need to leave. Find help." "There's no help left," Sergei laughed bitterly. "We're all cursed. You too. The moment you crossed the village boundary, they felt you. Now you're one of us." A massive shadow suddenly detached itself from the trees and moved toward them. David froze, unable to move. A loud whisper filled his mind, deafening him, plunging him into a nightmare. Sergei grabbed his hand and pulled him back toward the house. "We have to hide. It's the only way to survive, for a little while." They ran back to the house, but the shadows were already closing in. Sergei locked the door and covered the windows. The walls of the house vibrated under the pressure of something unseen but terrifying. Inside, the darkness grew thicker, and the fire in the hearth was dying. "This is the end," Sergei whispered. "They will take us all. There is no escape." But David refused to believe it. He darted around the house, trying to find a way out, but every step he took only brought him closer to the terrifying truth: they were trapped. Something ancient, dark, and relentless had risen over them, and now it demanded its due. The whispering intensified, and at that moment the door burst open with a loud crack. The shadows rushed in, and darkness swallowed everything. Sergei screamed. His scream turned into a hoarse whisper, and then disappeared forever. David was left alone. The darkness squeezed tighter around his mind, and he realized that time was up.